towards the unchanging conception, the grand synthesis, you see. Then in the final analysis, the process of change is not governed by the sensory. It's governed by the source of form, order, the unchanging. And so Hegel, understandably, is interested in seeing reason freed from its bondage to the senses. And that reaches its culmination, you see, when in the arts, oh yes, you are working creatively with sensory material. You see, reason is really working, particularly if you're a romanticist, imaginatively, not slavishly, imaginatively, working with sensory material. And in religion, even more so. And in philosophy, yes, that's where you get most concrete. Yeah, most concrete thought comes in philosophy. You see, because thought is dealing with concept, not with sensory objects. So this is what he's after. The avoidance of what is static, abstract, the development of the concrete. Now, when he's dealing with this, remember that the lens through which he sees things on this vast screen is the lens of our own self-consciousness. Okay? So what he's doing in this phenomenology, remember phenomenology is a description. What he's engaged in is sometimes impersonation, role-playing, you see, empathetic description. He's entering into the reflection, the feelings of the individual in the situation he's describing, entering into it empathetically, not standing outside describing behaviors, but entering inside to capture what is it like in the emerging consciousness, you see. Phenomenology, we'll find as it moves on into the 20th century, is concerned with the structures of our conscious being in the world. You see? He's trying to trace out the dialectical structure of our conscious being in the world. He's not trying to deal with the consciousness in abstraction from the world. That was Descartes' mistake, shutting himself in a stove-heated room of all things and asking if the world exists. How abstract can you get? You see? William Temple, who was a neo-Hegelian philosopher in England, became Archbishop of Canterbury in the 1940s. He has a chapter in one of his books entitled Descartes' Faux Pas. His faux pas was to shut himself up in a room and ask himself if anything existed. And can't you imagine Descartes stoking the stove to keep warm while wondering if his body exists? You know, self-contradictoriness of the abstract. But no, the concern is with the structures of conscious being. Notice the term being. You see the concept of being. What being is revealed through our self-consciousness. So you look at our self-conscious being in the world, in relationship to. Now, you see, there was a tendency back in the 17th, 18th century for the individual to be regarded as a Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe was a social philosopher. He wasn't just a kid story writer. What he was writing was a piece of social satire when he wrote Robinson Crusoe. In his more philosophical writings, what Daniel Defoe writes about is the isolated individual, ruled by reason, self-sufficient, living alone on his island with his goats and his God. You see? And he doesn't need others. He's able to bring nature under the rule of reason, provide for himself. When the savages come, he keeps away from them until he sees them just about to make dinner of Friday. So he rescues Man Friday, but keeps him in submission until he becomes rational enough that they can enter into social contract. When the Spanish sailors come, they keep away from them. They're not rational. When the British sailors come, it's another story. They enter into social contract and sail back to England. That Defoe knew what he was doing. The individual is an isolated island, self-sufficient. Not so for Hegel. There's no such thing as an individual in isolation. Even self-consciousness does not exist in isolation. You see, he's interested in the structures of our conscious being in the world. There's no other being than in the world for the individual. I just wish Hegel had written another Robinson Crusoe to depict this. It would have been better, the phenomenology of mind, wouldn't it? Maybe you should do that. Well, he starts then with subjective spirit, and if you have the outline with you, you notice that the realm of subjective or individual spirit begins with a thesis having to do with sense consciousness. Now you'll say sense consciousness is not the same as self-consciousness. Sense consciousness is something which indeed the animal has. In fact, that level of the dialectic simply carries over from the end of the grand antithesis about nature, dealing with organisms, that worked down to a description of physiology, which physiology gives rise to consciousness on the part of animal life. So sense consciousness is simply the, if you like, part of the synthesis in nature, now becoming the thesis for a new antithesis. Okay? Sense consciousness rooted in the biological, brain processes, sensory awareness. But sense consciousness is simply consciousness of the other, consciousness of the other. And that stands in antithesis to consciousness of oneself. Sense consciousness, self-consciousness. But you don't really have mind, spirit, reason at work, free, until that self-consciousness in dealing with the world of sense consciousness achieves its freedom in that world of sense consciousness. And so it's not just self-consciousness isolated, but rather self-consciousness at work, reflectively, rationally, freely, creatively, doing something to shake the world of sense consciousness. And that is the stepping stone over into objective spirit, into talking about law and order in society. Because what is law and order? But the work of reason ordering the world of sense consciousness. Get the transitions? Now, you have, in the anthology, two pieces taken from the section on subjective spirit. One is the master-servant, and the other is the stoic, skeptic, unhappy consciousness. What's going on in those selections? Well, I think in the light of what I've said, you can already anticipate what's going on. The master-servant piece is famous. You find it referred to again and again. The concept of alienation arises out of this. Concept of alienation that was at work in the early existentialists, at work in Marx and Engels, at work even in the political correctness movement today. You see, asserting political correctness will become alienation of minority groups. Concept of alienation. We'll find in Sartre that we come back to this. Basically, what it's about is the fact that one only achieves self-consciousness in relationship to the other. You see? You only achieve self-consciousness in relationship to the other. So this is, if you like, a phenomenology of emerging self-consciousness. It's an empathetic description of what the master goes through, what the servant goes through, what they go through in relationship to each other. You see, even in terms of the meaning of the words, master and servant, there is no such thing as a master who doesn't have a servant. He's not a master if he doesn't have one. There's no such thing as a servant if he doesn't have a master. You see? What is he? He doesn't know. He's out of work. So that one's identity is dependent on that relationship. One's identity is dependent on that relationship. By the same token, there is no subject without an object. There's no object without a subject that it's the object of. These are relational terms. These are polarities. There we go, polarities. And the dialectic is what he's tracing, the dialectic within this polarity. The isolated self is always incomplete. We have to see the individual self in relationship to the other. Now, in order then to achieve self-identity, the one, standing in opposition to the other, thinks he has to cancel out the other, negates the other. I'm the master. Whereupon the servant proceeds to make the master utterly dependent on him, the servant. Now who's the master? You see the self-destructiveness, the self-contradiction in affirming that I am the master independently. Because to be a master, I have to have a servant on whom I depend. Who then is the master? There's a self-contradiction involved. Master-servant relationship. So that in order to be certain of myself, I negate the other, but in doing so, I negate myself. Now that word negate, you'll find used a lot in Hegel and in literature on Hegel. It simply means there is an antithesis. The antithesis negates the thesis. They're opposites. The German term is Aufgehoben, which means, literally, as you can translate it, to have had it. To have had it. You had it. You negate it. You're done with it. The thesis does that to the antithesis. The antithesis does that to the thesis. But then gradually, their interdependence begins to emerge. The master thinks of himself as independent. The servant is dependent. The master is what he is for himself. The servant is what he is for another. But the master is only independent through his dependence on another. And the servant, in his being for the other, achieves not only his dependence, but something of an independence. He is for himself what he is. Do you remember the upstairs, downstairs movies? Are they from before your era? Blank looks, you must have been. Well, it was an Edwardian scene in England where the aristocratic family upstairs had family servants downstairs, of whom the butler stood out. So when European nobility came to dinner, they wanted to meet the butler. Can you imagine it? You see, that butler, in being the servant to his master, had achieved such an identity that the nobility wanted to meet him. Couldn't have done it by himself. And the master couldn't have been the master he was without the servant. The final scene in the series was a very happy synthesis, where the servant, the butler, is so sick he's having to retire and be pensioned off, and the master goes and sits down beside his bed in the basement, and they talk like old buddies. And the barriers have gone. You see? And there's a relationship of synthesis that's achieved. Now, I don't know if the author upstairs, downstairs read Hegel, but it sure sounded like it to me. Master-servant relationship. The interdependence. You see, it's not a matter of individuals being dependent. It's not a matter of individuality meaning independence. That's what's broken up marriages with the development, I'm afraid, of some aspects of the feminist movement, because the feminist movement has tried to achieve independence rather than mutuality of interdependence. They've tried to avoid dependence and have striven for independence rather than interdependence, you see. And it's been very problematic in our society. I think we have to overcome overdependence, but not in an impossible independence. That's the individualistic 18th century note. You see. It's interdependence where the thing comes together. The synthesis. Well, you get the same sort of picture in the Stoic, skeptic, unhappy consciousness. The Stoic, that's really the thesis stage, because a Stoic, in the freedom of his thought, asserts his independence of all externals. Remember the Stoic attitude? You see? In the freedom of my mind, I'm independent of whatever may happen to my body. Remember Epictetus, the slave whose master broke his leg? He stoically took it. You see? Okay, so there's the thesis stage, the Stoic. The skeptic takes that freedom even further. The skeptic negates the very reality of the other in his thinking. Rules him out. Treats him in a fickle way. But then where does that leave? You move from the Stoic kind of thing to the skeptic kind of thing, denying the other altogether, to the unhappy consciousness. That's the individual alienated from himself. Yeah, because in denying the other, I'm denying my own identity in relationship to the other. And so the skeptic, who knows nothing about anything in relationship to himself, is going to be a mighty unhappy consciousness. That makes me think that Hegel must have taught undergraduates at some stage. Because I think that's a phenomenon that we all observe. You see, that a person who for a while moves into some skeptical phase in process of developing finds a lot of inner dissatisfaction. Because there's no identity in relationship to what is. We're not isolated individuals in a vacuum in a stove-heated room, but in relationship to others. Okay? So that divided self, then, incomplete self, is the unhappy consciousness. Well, the synthesis, then, within subjective spirit is a truly rational spirit. Reason that gets beyond simply observing the world of the senses and the other, gets beyond simply contemplating his own independent identity, and becomes a reflective, rational being addressing the orderedness of the world to which we're related. If there is liberty for Kant, it's always going to be liberty within a framework of law. It's never liberty to do anything at all, whatever you want. It's liberty within a framework of law. That's the rational one. And that because there's no such thing as existence without essence. Because there is logos structure running throughout all being. So you have to have the individual in relationship to the other, in a law structure way. Well, does that help to make sense of what's going on? Comment? I have to leave you to unravel the more detailed aspects of the dialectic of the master-servant relationship, but I think if you can see what's going on, you can unravel it very well. Okay? Then a few words about objective spirit. Objective spirit. And here you notice the triad moves from the abstract concept of law, okay? The concept of law is, after all, an abstraction, to the antithesis, dealing with matters of individual conscience and morality, law in the abstract to the most concrete, to the synthesis of social morality, social order. As I say, law in the abstract provides the context for dealing with freedom. Law in the abstract is the rule of reason. It's the Kantian conception of universal duty. And you have to admit that Kant's conception of duty is an abstraction, very abstract. Law in the abstract has to do with rights, human rights, conceived as being something objective, rooted in reality. Sure, that's the abstraction. But you have to unpack the concept. You have to unravel the concept. And you begin to do so when you turn from those universalized abstractions about law and rights to questions of individual consciousness, from something like law, which is completely objective, to something like conscience, which is very inward, very subjective in the sense of inwardness. From talking of objective duty to talking of myosis. Now, of course, Kant works with both, acting out of a sense of duty. His is sort of like a moral sense philosophy, as well as one of objective rights and duty. The thesis and the antithesis. But what Hegel tries to do is to bring these two together in a synthesis of a social ethic, addressing the social order. You see, that's where he makes a big step forward, at least a big step beyond Kant and Kant's predecessors. For the simple reason that Kant's predecessors and Kant himself thought of individuals as free individually. Thought of individual rights as the last point of reference. Robinson Crusoe theory. Hegel, on the other hand, sees individuals achieving rationality only in relationship. And so which is the more ultimate concern? Individual or social institution? Well, of course, social structure. Ordered relationships, which is what we mean by social institution. A law-governed pattern of relationships among individuals. Social institution. And so in the synthesis, he sees it getting much more concrete. It's in social structures that we live out our morality. It's in social structures that we have to act rationally. There is where the rule of laws pertains. And so he has a lot to say about family. And if social structure predominates over the individual in terms of concreteness and level of development, he's not very much in favor of divorce. In fact, he's very much against it. And it's there in that context that he talks about the state, and his political philosophy begins to emerge. And he wants to say that we find our individual consciousness, our individual freedom maximized in the context of the sovereignty of the state. Yes, you could say, if you like, that you have much greater freedom within marriage than outside it. And you have much greater freedom within the state than in some anarchistic realm. You see. And the ideal for a state, as far as he is concerned, is some kind of constitutional government, where the representation comes not from just individuals amassed according